Hey, what is up, everybody? Platform Disciple here. And with the upcoming set revelations, we of course have some more spoilers. These spoilers have been posted on a few different channels, so you may have already seen them. These spoilers are not exclusive to my channel. I received some via email alert. There's also some on a Kickstarter page, which I believe is a temporary page before the actual Kickstarter launches. And then there's some in the Discord channel, the official Discord channel for Infinity Wars under the card discussion tab. So if you are not connected to any of these, the Discord link is in the description. I'll have the link to the Kickstarter page that has those spoilers on it in the description as well. And then finally, if you want to make sure that you're getting email updates, I believe it is lightmare.com.au/revelations, and I'll put that in the description as well. So anyways, let's jump into it because there's 10 cards and I'm just going to give you my 2 cents on each of these. So we're going to start with the couple that I saw in the Discord server. The first one is DOG, or Dog, and it is an epic for Overseers and Genesis, which is an interesting combination. I don't typically see those two factions played together a lot, and this could be a card that really encourages you to play those factions together with a build around, because Dog is a card that really encourages you to build around it. So it is a 1-cost 0/1. However, when it enters the deployed area, it gets +4/+4 permanently. And when this says permanently, that means it retains that +4/+4 even if it moves to other zones. And then if it has 8 or greater attack, it gains flying. And if it has 12 or greater attack, you draw a card. So with this card, you can potentially leverage effects that take it in and out of play to make it bigger and make a really big dog. And there's a few cards that already exist that do that. The one that comes to mind that I am kind of most excited about is the card Awaken, because one of the concerns with playing a dog deck would be that if they kill your dog, then you've lost the core of your deck. But if you have Awaken, it allows you to take dog out of your graveyard and get it back into play, which not only will help you keep dog on the board and alive and healthy, but it also will give it that additional +4/+4 and increment towards you drawing cards every time you manage to take the card in and out of play. So overall, I think this is a really cool card. I think it's really fun. I'm excited to play with it because it presents a new deck type, a new deck building challenge where you can really synergize around this specific card. Big fan of that card. All right, next up we have, just scrolling through here, Micro Rift Research. And this is another Genesis Overseers card. So again, more reason to play these two factions together now. And it is 3 cost. It's an ability. It's preemptive, which for those of you who don't know, preemptive effects resolve before other effects. So you can potentially break priority order with preemptive cards. And it removes up to 2 target characters, which means it takes them out of the game. And at the end of the turn, those characters return to play. I think this card's really good right there, but to make it even better, it has a new keyword called Recall, and it says Recall 6. And Recall lets you play the card from the graveyard at its recall cost. When you do that, it removes the card from the game. So you can only recall a card once, but it lets you double dip on the same card, or you can potentially discard this card with another effect and still be able to access it from your graveyard. And just to clarify, I think this card was pretty good even without recall, and with recall, that's just awesome. This card can be used to take things out of the assault zone if you need to stall for time, take things out of the defense zone if you need to press for damage, and also notably, you can target something like Dog and have it leave play and come back into play to trigger its come into play effect. So again, really awesome card. This one's a total winner. A lot of these are winners actually, but let's move on. So moving on to the email, the 5 cards that we got to see. For those of you who used that lightmare .au backslash revelations, if I've got that right, lightmare.com.au backslash revelations. It'll be in the description. So we got 5 cards here. One of them, the first one, is a Flame Dawn Genesis card, Drop Pod Battalion. It is got charge, so it deploys directly to the assault zone, and it's a 6/2, which is below the rate you'd want for a 3-cost card. However, when it enters the deployed area, adjacent characters get +4/+4 until the end of the turn. I think that is pretty good. My one kind of like grievance with the card is that it's not artificial. You can't take advantage of some of those artificial character synergies that you might be leveraging in Genesis. But as far as like the ability this card has to push for a lot of damage is really high. And we've seen Genesis plus Flame Dawn aggro decks many times over the years, and I think this could be another card that really supports that strategy and maybe brings it back into the limelight a little, because I haven't seen them in a bit. Okay, next we have a Sleepers plus Descendants of the Dragons card, and it's Concordant Collective. It's 4 cost, and it is a 4/16, so it's a very durable card. For its cost, its stat line is pretty good. It's an undead plant. Undead is something we care about, but plant, interesting card type. I don't think we've ever seen that before, to the best of my knowledge. And when Concordant Collective is on the battlefield, prevent all damage to other characters you control by sources you control. So this will let you play something like Yuan-Shi's Wrath, and this guy will not protect himself, so he'll take 4 damage, but it will protect your other characters, which is pretty nice. The last effect on the card is you can pay 2. All other characters become poisoned, taking 1 damage at the end of each turn. This can only be activated once per turn. I believe that this will stack if you use it in multiple consecutive turns. It also notably doesn't poison itself, but does poison all of your other characters. So this card's ability to protect your characters from damage sources you control comes into play just on its own on this card. Other thoughts? This card, when it says all other characters, that hits every zone, including the command zone. So this is a pretty powerful card, is basically the long story short. I think it's a very strong anti-aggro card. Because it's got so much health, and then it has the ability to let you fire off AoE damage effects kind of left and right. So I think it's pretty good. It's just a question of Sleepers plus Descendants of the Dragons. How do you leverage this in a control deck? Because I think this is really a control deck card. Okay, next we have Dragon Trainer, and this is a hybrid Flame Dawn Warpath card, so you can play it in either of the factions. It's a 4 cost 10/12, which is a pretty good stat line for its cost. I think it's fair to say that this is average or slightly above average stats for a 4 cost. And it has pay 1, exhaust this card, overcharge twice, which means you remove the left 2 most cards from your hand from the game, and you have to have at least 2 for this effect to happen. If you do, create a random dragon in your hand. So I think this card is fine. I don't think that it's super applicable to either faction, because it's a question of, I think you could use it in the command zone and have it as a way to change your deck density to be lower cost. So like for Flame Dawn, you can be playing all aggro, and then later in the game, pitch your puny characters from your hand to try to get like a huge dragon. Or if you're Warpath, you can be playing a very high density of ramp cards, and then once you've accumulated a really large number of resources, you could start again transferring your ramp cards to try to get a big dragon. But because of the random nature of it, I don't think it's going to be super strong. But I will caveat here that Rift Run, or the draft format for Infinity Wars, when that does come back, this card is going to be crazy good because it is a 4-cost 10-12, which is already good enough to play, with the ability to throw away your garbage cards and get a random dragon. The big difference between draft or Rift Run and a constructed format where you could put any card in your deck of your choice is that in draft, you don't have a lot of control over whether you put in good cards with high synergy. So you do end up with some junk. Whereas in constructed, you really ought to have no junk in your deck. And because this lets you turn junk into potentially better cards, this is a card that's really good in draft because you are likely to have more junk. Okay. Next, we have Sleepers plus Genesis. And it is a 11 cost ability, which for players who are maybe less experienced with the game, you can only get to 10 resources without taking some extra steps to get an additional resource, which generally means cards that cost more than 10 are very difficult to deploy and have usually very powerful effects. And this card says take control of target character on the battlefield or artifact, which for an 11 cost card is just not very good. There's no way to get around saying that. It's too much that you have to invest. And if you're aiming for character, there's the possibility that you miss because if they move it back to the support zone, then tough luck, you missed it. But you can get any artifact. It's just at its base, it's not great. However, it has recall for 7. So again, you can play this card from your graveyard by spending 7 resources. And that's a whole different story. At the cost of 7 and being able to play from your graveyard, this is pretty decent. The question is basically, how do you get this into your graveyard without paying 11? Because I think that this card is one that, unlike what I think most recall cards are going to be, I think most recall cards are going to be you play them from your hand, and then if you have nothing better to do or in a pinch, you play it from your graveyard. This card, I think you actively want to seek putting it in your graveyard. So there might be a deck that would run this. Sleepers has some stuff that lets you put things in the graveyard. If you want to throw in Exiles in there as well and have cards that you discard cards from your hand, this is a great card to discard. So I'm kind of, I feel pretty neutral about this card. It could be fine, but the 11 cost is a pretty tough pill to swallow. All right, next, Shattered Reality. It's a 7 cost Exiles plus Overseers card, which again a unique combination, but not one that we're unfamiliar with at this point. And this card is just devastating. It's put target character on top of its owner's deck, then create a Madness on top of that player's deck. And Madness is a 1-cost card that says discard your hand. So Madness, most of the time, is just junk. So this card takes any character, puts it on top of the owner's deck, and then puts a Madness on top of that character, which means that they have to wait 2 turns before they see their character again. I think this is good. I think this is really good. It also doesn't have any restrictions mentioned on which zones you can target, so you can take their commander and put it on top of their deck and bury it under a Madness, or aim at something in the support zone, so it's fairly risk-free. 7 is a very high cost, but this has the ability to set your opponent behind multiple turns. Very disruptive card, and I think it's fair to think of it as removal, because if there's a character causing you problems, being able to not have to think about that character for a couple of turns is pretty good. All right. that covers everything that we saw in the email announcement. So let's go to what is on the Kickstarter page, and I think this is technically connected to the old Kickstarter, so I'm not sure if there will be a new URL, but either way, it's going to be in the description here. The first card we're going to look at is Made Mighty by Metal, and it is a Warpath Genesis card. Another unusual combination. It's really cool that we're seeing a lot of play between factions that maybe we don't usually get to see. It's 9 cost. It's Artificial Beast, so it does have both of the relevant character types from Warpath and Genesis. The card's a 2020, which is pretty large, but not an unusual stat line for a 9 cost card. It's unstoppable, which means that if it's in the assault zone and kills a character, it attacks again and will continue attacking until it stops killing characters or it dies. And it says, Made Mighty by Metal's cost is reduced by the number of characters you control with 15 or more attack. So when it's 9 cost, really, you might be able to play this for 8 or 7, potentially less, depending on the circumstance, but I think it's 15 or more attack is a relatively difficult condition to meet multiple times. Like, I don't know how many characters with 15 or more attack you're going to have out at once, unless you're already like completely crushing your opponent. And while Made Mighty by Metal, this is kind of a tongue twister, is on the battlefield, which means the assault zone or the defense zone, if a character you control with 15 or more attack dies, and this includes himself, it survives on 1 health instead. This can only trigger once per turn. And we'll have to wait and see. The question is, when it says only once per turn, does that mean once per turn per character? Because that's my initial interpretation, is that if I have, like, let's say I have 3 characters out with 15 or more attack and my opponent plays Mass Death and kills all of them, my initial thought on reading the card was that it protects, Made Mighty by Metal will protect all 3 of them, but won't protect you from like 2 Mass Deaths in 1 turn. But it might only work for 1 character, I'm not really sure. Either way, I think this is very good, because being able to protect yourself from those board wipes is very significant. That especially for Warpath and Genesis, which frequently can lose to control decks due to having their characters die over and over and you lose on morale, having the ability to push for extra damage through a board wipe is significant. So I think it's pretty, I don't know, it's got to be at least all right, is what I'm getting at. All right. We have a 9 cost single Purity Flame Dawn card, so it has quite a bit of flexibility. Celebration of Heroes. And it's all characters you control get +3/+0 and an additional life. Very simple effect, but additional lives are extremely potent. 9 is a very high cost, so it's very. I'm not sure if this card is worth it or not. It's kind of hard to tell. It depends on the deck. If you're in triple Flame Dawn, I think this is too slow. That by the time you get to 9 resources, you're either winning the game or your characters have already died. But there might be a combination with other factions that this could be very potent in. And I've brought it up here and there, but again, if draft comes back around, this could be really good in draft, because I think even if you only have like 1 or 2 characters out, that extra life is a pretty big deal in draft where you have more of a slow, grindy value format. Okay, and we are on to our final card here. Analyze the Threat, and it is Genesis plus Descendants of the Dragons. Again, an unusual combination of factions. And I do want to take a second here to acknowledge the artwork. Appears to have a person from Genesis and a person from Descendants of the Dragons. I'm not sure if they're specific characters. However, I do recognize that little mite in the bubble there is a infested card, which name I'm lapsing my mind, but it'll be on the screen. So that's a cool little nod to that. And the card is 4-cost ability. It is target character you control gains barrier 1. And barrier is basically protects you from 1 kill or damage effect, and then the barrier dissipates. So that's decent. And the next time the targeted character enters combat with a character, draw 2 cards. I think it's pretty good. It's very straightforward. Anything that draws you 2 cards at a relatively low cost seems decent. So I think it's fair to think this is 4-cost, draw 2 cards, and then barrier is just gravy, and it's pretty good. That wraps it up for today. I'm sure we'll be getting lots more spoilers, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And again, those 3 sources that I'm getting these spoilers from are in the description of the video. So be sure to connect to those sources, because I, depending on how busy I am, might not get to upload them in a timely fashion, or frankly at all. So yeah, anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and until next time, see you around.